Welcome, Weiss fans, to the second part of the Advanced Tips and Tricks Guide. Originally, I was getting ready to do a video based on colors, talking about what yellow and red and blue and green all do and the differences between them, but somebody's been bugging me to do a video about deck archetypes for a while now, so I'm going to go ahead and give them what they want. First thing I gotta do is explain exactly what an archetype is, because some people tend to take the term archetype a little too seriously. A deck archetype is the core set of cards you expect to win you games and your deck revolves around. A lot of people seem to think that if you run one type of archetype, you're restricted to cards from that archetype. Like people will run beatdown decks and expect every single card in their deck to just be a beater. So here's a list of archetype cores that you can use as a starting point in making your next competitive deck. There's a plethora of different archetypes out there, but they can all be boiled down to the main four. You got your beatdown decks, your change decks, your combo decks, and your control decks. Beatdown decks are decks with really incredibly good field presence, aka super ridiculously high numbers. Great example of this deck style is the typical Sword Art Online. You can see that we start off strong with an obnoxious 4,000 monster at level 0. 4,000 level 0s are kind of like your way of saying, hey, did you draw a Suicider in your opening hand? You didn't. GG! Then let's look at our main beater Asuna. Under the right circumstances, Asuna gets as high as a 9,000. A 9,000 level 1 stock with, get this, Super Encore. 9,000 is what level 2s should be getting at. And what's that? You figured out a combo that gets over my 9,000? Well, okay then, I guess I'll just discard one card from my hand. It even ties up nicely with really good assists, like this one, who gives its 1,000 power boost to everybody and not just the characters in front of it. All in all, the deck is trying to ensure that when your opponent puts a character down onto the field, it doesn't last more than one turn. The deck style itself requires little to no setup, and that makes it incredibly easy to pick up and play. It does have its disadvantages though, the biggest one being if your opponent is also playing a beatdown deck and their numbers are bigger than yours, then that's just it. The entire point of your deck is ruined, and unless you have good control along with the beaters, then you're pretty much SOL. Beatdown decks are also easily walled against, because some decks don't even require high numbers to work. Most of them just work off of encores. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter how much higher you're beating a character with Super Encore, they're still just going to have to discard one card from their hand. Change decks are kind of another form of beatdown deck, where you're not so much playing with cards that are really powerful for your level, you're building to play at a level higher than your opponent without actually having to level up. A good example of changer decks are the Madoka decks, as a lot of them use changers in every deck they play. When this level 1 Homer is in the back row, you can tap it to give one of your characters a 1000 boost that lasts until the end of your opponent's next turn. By changing it on level 1, you can guarantee yourself a character swinging for 2 soul damage one level earlier than it's supposed to. Mommy's change is slightly similar with a bit more bulk and added utility. The level 1's assist effect gives all of your characters a 1000 boost as long as it's your turn. The level 2 is a 9000 that also swings for 2 soul damage, and it has the added ability to not let your opponent use backup cards. You can't use them either, but if your opponent's level 1 and they're dealing with a 9000, chances are you're not going to need them anyway. Ryoko's got assist like the others, and she can even turn into her level 3. Her level 3 doesn't heal, but it does have some really good utility. You can tap 2 of your characters, and all of a sudden those characters with Encore are a little bit more killable now. Remember, Ryoko's effect happens before the Encore step, so you're getting rid of all of those characters that just don't seem to die. And this all starts at level 2, making the level 3 play a lot less risky. The main downside to change decks is how much more setup they need than regular beatdown decks. This can be lessened though by using cards that specifically force you to discard cards from your hand, such as characters with Super Encore. This helps guarantee that your higher level cards are in your discard pile and ready to be changed into. Some of the change cards also seem to be slightly weaker than other cards at that level. This isn't so much the case with Madoka cards, but the problem does still exist. This can make your advantage a lot more temporary, so you need to be aware of this and run some kind of backup plan just in case your changes don't go the way you want them to. Combo decks are decks that don't rely so much on having field presence, but do have other alternative ways to win. For example, a lot of combo decks will run combos that deal direct damage outside of battle. For instance, my personal favorite set Disgaea does this. You look at cards like this and you think to yourself, why would I ever run a 3000 level 1? It doesn't even have a form of Encore. But that's the case with combo cards. You have to look into it a little more closely. It bonds with Etna and Flan, which is a level 1 counter, which is very, very good. That means I can pay 1 stock and my hand size goes up by 1. Plus, its Climax combo automatically puts any card I want back on top of the opponent's deck. That means I can guarantee myself 1 extra damage and possibly slow down Changers. Besides, there are other cards in the set that can keep this card alive. Don't you look all innocent, Flan. You're a monster. Level 2 Laharl's Climax combo not only makes him a great assassin, but it also gives you 1 extra damage if he reverses a character. Which, at 10,500, he probably will. He also comes built in with Super Encore. Mid-Boss is a hilarious character to play. If you play him and you have 5 or less cards in your deck, then you deck refresh. But you don't take the 1 damage, your opponent takes the 1 damage. This guy also runs a lot of really good Brainstorm, so the two kind of combo into one another. You Brainstorm until you have 5 or less cards in your deck, and then you play this character, refresh your deck, and deal your opponent 1 extra damage. It's a pretty cheap tactic, and I love it. On their own, all of these cards are pretty weak, but when you combo them together with Climaxes and other character cards, then you can create really swift and unpredictable moves that your opponent has to adjust to. These decks do require the most setup to pull off, but if done correctly, they can also have the biggest payoff. Control decks mainly focus on getting advantages through other ways, such as controlling your Climaxes or messing with your opponent's field. One really neat deck that does this is in fact Fate Zero. Shiro's Climax combo gets rid of a character that's level 2 or lower. Note that it doesn't say front row character, it just says character, so you can get rid of characters in the back row. You could get rid of a character with really good Encore, you could get rid of a back row character that's giving way too much assist power, or you could get rid of a Changer. It has a lot of applications, and it's a relatively cheap effect to pull off. Gilgamesh has a similar effect, though it is noticeably weaker. You can't target back row characters, and you have to search your deck and get rid of a Climax in order to pull it off. On the upside, though, it's not a Climax combo. You can do it whenever you want to, and heck, even do it multiple times if you really need to. This is also a really good effect that lets you check your deck. You could check your Climaxes to see how many you have left, or you can check for specific cards you're looking for, like your deck's level 3s. Even through the weakness, this finds a way to be a pretty decent card, especially if you know when and how exactly you need to use it. Don't underestimate how powerful an open spot at level 2 or level 3 is. The Sisters let you switch 2 cards in your hand with 2 cards in your discard pile as long as the 2 cards in your discard pile have the name Saber. The Saber cards are definitely some of the best cards in the Fate Zero set, so you're probably going to have a couple of cards with the name Saber. This card and cards like it have a lot of really good uses. For one thing, you can get rid of Climaxes to make sure they're in your discard pile when you deck refresh. You can also use it to set up your changes. And of course, in return, you get to choose which 2 Sabers you need at the current moment. All in all, for 1 stock, it's a really good effect and really shows the kind of power that control decks can have. Control decks normally take very little setup to use correctly. And ironically, they're almost better at clearing fields than the Beatdown decks are. Control decks are all about getting around things, getting around high numbers or gimmicks. But, as always, there are drawbacks to running a control deck. For one, your stock is going to be a mess during control deck play. Control decks are normally really expensive, and when you're out of stock, that's it, your game's done. Also, as you can guess, your numbers are very low, so don't count on field advantage. Hope to God you have enough control to take care of everything your opponent's laying down in front of you. Just take care of key cards, don't spend too much stock getting rid of stuff that doesn't matter, and control those Climaxes. Well, that's my rundown of deck archetypes. Remember what I said before, a deck archetype can't survive on its own. Your beatdown deck needs control options and good changes. Your control decks should have some good Climax combos to make up for all of the extra cards you're getting. Your core archetype only affects your winning condition, not all the cards it needs to win. If you have any more questions, comments, concerns, ideas for what you want my next video to be, then leave it in the comments section below. If you just can't stand the new comment system, then send me a message over YouTube, or even go to my Facebook page. You should be able to find me. I think I'm the only Kudou-kun. If you liked this video, go ahead and slap that thumbs up button, and if you want to see more, then the subscribe button should be right next to it. Until then, dear viewers, I bid you adieu.